The faint hum of Dr. Elena Cortez's terminal echoed in the dimly lit underground bunker. With trembling fingers, she ran the last set of decryption algorithms, her mind racing through the implications of the discovery. The decrypted message flickered onto the screen, a cryptic sequence of symbols interspersed with bursts of human text. The Forgotten Forge, Earth's last hope, buried beneath the mountain of the Silent Watcher. Her heart skipped a beat. She'd heard rumors of the Forgotten Forge, a mythical place where humanity's greatest weapons were once crafted. But she never thought it was more than a myth. Now, the message confirmed it. There was hope. A weapon strong enough to fight back against the alien invaders who had enslaved humanity for the last 20 years. She was about to begin decoding further when the sharp crackle of the comm system cut through the silence. Captain Adam Harper's voice came through, strained yet steady. "Dr. Cortez, we've been compromised. The aliens know we're here." Her pulse quickened. The bunker they had taken refuge in wasn't safe anymore. Outside, the alien patrols were getting closer. She grabbed the encrypted data drive, shoving it into her jacket pocket, before sprinting out of her office. As she rounded the corner, she collided with Captain Harper, his face grim. "What's going on?" she asked, breathless. "They found us. The outpost is under siege," he said, his eyes dark with the burden of leadership. "We need to move now." The rest of the resistance team was already gathering in the command center, gathering weapons, securing the exits, and preparing for what could be their last stand. But there was no choice. Earth's survival depended on the mission they had just begun. "We have coordinates for the forge," Dr. Cortez said, voice low but filled with resolve. "It's our only shot. We can't afford to waste any more time." Harper nodded, giving a curt signal to his team. "Gather the supplies. We're moving out. We'll be the first to reach it, or we die trying." The team scrambled into action. Outside, the distant sound of alien warships grew louder, the once silent skies now a tapestry of ominous shadows. The resistance, fractured and barely functional, was humanity's last hope. The alien overlords had come to Earth decades ago, overwhelming the planet's defenses with ruthless efficiency. Over time, the alien fleets ravaged cities, enslaved billions, and crushed every attempt at rebellion. But through all the suffering, something had been left behind, something that could change the tide of war. As Dr. Cortez hurried to join the others, her mind raced. The Forgotten Forge had to be real. She couldn't afford to let herself doubt. But it wasn't just about finding the forge. It was about unlocking its secrets and using the weapons inside to challenge the alien overlords. The team filed into a hidden, makeshift transport shuttle, the engine's low hum drowning out the chaos around them. As the shuttle lifted off, Dr. Cortez glanced at the blue-green orb that had once been Earth's vibrant, thriving home. Now it was a dying world, held in the grip of an unstoppable alien force. But not for long, she promised herself. Not for long. The journey ahead was fraught with danger. The aliens were already mobilizing, and their reach extended far beyond Earth's atmosphere. But if the forge could be opened, humanity would once again have a fighting chance. The shuttle broke through the clouds and into the dark expanse of space. As Earth faded behind them, the team's resolve hardened. They were heading into the unknown, toward a place that could either be their salvation or their tomb. But in that moment, they all knew one thing for sure. There was no turning back. The shuttle's engines hummed steadily as it sliced through the inky void of space, carrying its occupants deeper into the unknown. Outside, the stars seemed endless, but beneath the sterile calm of the stars, the threat of the alien overlords loomed ever closer. Dr. Cortez stared at the map on her datapad, her fingers tapping restlessly as the coordinates to the forge blinked in front of her. "We're heading into hostile territory." Captain Harper's voice broke through the hum of the shuttle systems. He stood at the front, watching the horizon with sharp eyes. "Keep your guard up, everyone. I don't need to remind you how much is riding on this mission." The resistance members moved quietly, preparing for whatever lay ahead. Among them was Lieutenant Claire Jensen, a seasoned soldier who had seen too many battles lost, and Sergeant Marcus Cole, a grizzled veteran with a reputation for getting things done. Each of them knew what was at stake, but none of them spoke of it aloud. The weight of the mission was enough to silence even the most hardened soldiers. Dr. Cortez, lost in thought, leaned over the datapad once more, scanning the map again. The forge wasn't far now, but reaching it would be no easy task. Hidden beneath a mountainous range known as the Silent Watcher, the forge was buried within a labyrinth of ancient tunnels that no one had dared explore in centuries. The coordinates she had uncovered were fragmentary at best, filled with dead ends and false paths. But what the data did confirm was chilling. The aliens had already begun combing the area, their technology capable of detecting any human movement with terrifying precision. "We'll be landing near the foothills," Harper said, his voice taking on a sharp edge. "We need to make it to the entrance before the aliens arrive. Once we're inside, we'll be safe for a while, long enough to figure out what we're dealing with." "We won't have long," Dr. Cortez replied, adjusting her glasses. "The moment we land, we need to move fast. If we're compromised, there won't be a second chance." The shuttle began its descent toward the rugged landscape below, its engines humming louder as the mountains loomed in the distance. The foothills of the Silent Watcher were a vast, desolate wilderness, broken only by jagged peaks and treacherous ravines. There was no sign of life, no sign of civilization, just the cold, impassive presence of the mountains. "Everyone, suit up. We're on final approach," Harper called out, his voice low but commanding. Moments later, the shuttle's hatch opened with a hiss, and the team emerged onto the barren landscape. The chill of the wind cut through their clothes as they formed up in tight formation. The mountain ahead seemed to mock them, towering and silent, its secrets buried deep within. Dr. Cortez adjusted her gear and glanced at Harper, her eyes focused. "The forge should be under that ridge," she said, pointing to a massive rock formation in the distance. "We just have to get past the alien patrols." "That's the least of our worries," Jensen muttered, scanning the horizon with her rifle ready. "If the aliens are already here, they're not just searching for us. They're hunting for the forge itself." The team moved out quickly, their steps heavy against the rocky terrain. The atmosphere felt oppressive, as though something was watching them from the shadows of the mountains. The air was thin, each breath a little harder than the last, but they pushed on, undeterred. As they approached the base of the ridge, Harper signaled for them to halt. He crouched low, using a pair of binoculars to scan the area ahead. A pair of alien soldiers patrolled the entrance to a narrow cave system, their sleek, dark armor blending seamlessly with the surroundings. They spoke in guttural tones, their voices an eerie reminder of the power they wielded. "We can't engage them directly," Harper whispered. "We'll have to take them out quietly, or we risk alerting the entire patrol." Cole nodded, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. "I'll take the left one. Jensen, you take the right. We'll move in on my mark." The tension in the air was palpable as the team prepared to move. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of wind whistling through the ridges and the steady beat of hearts pounding in the silence. "On my mark," Harper muttered. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Then, with a swift command, the team was in motion. Cole and Jensen moved in synchronicity, their movements precise and calculated. In seconds, they had incapacitated the alien soldiers, their bodies falling silently to the ground. The rest of the team moved forward, the cave entrance now in sight. Dr. Cortez's breath hitched as she stepped forward, her heart racing. The ancient entrance, barely visible under centuries of rock and dirt, seemed to hold its breath, waiting for them to unlock its secrets. "This is it," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "We're in." But as they stepped through the entrance, a sudden tremor shook the ground beneath them. "Get inside. Now," Harper barked, pushing them into the darkness of the tunnel. The tremor was followed by the unmistakable sound of alien ships overhead. Their pursuit had already begun, and they had no time to lose. The tunnel entrance loomed before them, a dark, yawning maw in the side of the mountain. Inside, the air was thick with ancient dust and the weight of forgotten history. The team filed in quickly, their footsteps echoing off the cold stone walls as they descended deeper. Dr. Cortez led the way, her datapad lighting the path ahead, its soft glow illuminating the intricate carvings that adorned the tunnel walls. Signs of a civilization long gone, but somehow still present in the stones beneath their feet. "These are older than any records we have," Cortez muttered, her fingers tracing the symbols. "Whoever built this forge knew things we haven't even begun to understand." Harper's eyes flickered over the symbols, but he didn't pause to study them. "We'll have time for history later. Focus on the mission." They continued, the tunnel narrowing as they moved forward. The walls seemed to press in on them, and the temperature dropped. It felt like they were crossing some unseen threshold into another world, one hidden beneath the Earth's surface for millennia, forgotten by time. "Keep your eyes peeled," Jensen warned, her weapon raised. "This place doesn't feel right." The deeper they went, the more intense the feeling became. The silence of the cave was broken only by the occasional drip of water, the faintest sounds that seemed amplified in the eerie stillness. As they reached a large chamber, the darkness grew impenetrable. Dr. Cortez activated a small device from her pack, a glowing orb that cast a pale light over the surroundings, and what they saw froze them in their tracks. The room was massive, an underground sanctuary that dwarfed anything they had seen before. Great pillars of stone stretched toward the ceiling, and in the center of the chamber lay a vast, intricately designed structure. It was a forge, no doubt about it, but not one of any human design. Its surface shimmered with strange, foreign materials, the very air around it humming with a subtle, almost sentient energy. This is it," Dr. Cortez breathed. "The forgotten forge." The team gathered around the structure, their faces awash with awe and disbelief. The forge was unlike anything on Earth. The energy radiating from it felt both alien and familiar, like it had been waiting for someone to awaken it. Harper stepped forward, his expression serious. "How do we access it?" Cortez pulled out the encrypted data drive, plugging it into a terminal built into the side of the forge. The terminal's interface lit up, displaying a sequence of symbols that mirrored those they had seen in the tunnel. But as the data began to process, a low hum reverberated through the chamber, growing louder with each passing second. "I think it's responding to the encryption," Cortez said, her fingers flying over the controls. "But there's something off. It's asking for a specific input, like a key." Before anyone could react, a loud, grinding sound echoed through the chamber. The massive stone doors to the forge slammed shut, sealing them in. The hum of the forge intensified, and the lights flickered, casting long shadows across the walls. "Great, we've triggered something," Jensen said, her voice tight. Harper gripped his weapon. "Hold your ground. It's not over yet." Just then, a voice boomed, though it wasn't human. The alien language reverberated in their minds, a psychic assault that left them reeling. It wasn't just a communication. It was a command, a warning. The aliens had found them. "We're not alone anymore," Cole muttered, his voice dark with understanding. "They're coming." The ground trembled beneath their feet as the ceiling above them rumbled. The forge was coming to life, its ancient mechanisms grinding into action. Energy beams flickered from the walls, illuminating the entire chamber in harsh, unnatural light. Dr. Cortez scrambled, her eyes darting between the terminal and the team. "We have to activate the forge. It's the only way we'll survive this." Harper nodded. "Then do it. We'll cover you." As Cortez continued to input commands, the alien voice grew louder in their minds, echoing with a menacing tone. The alien invaders were closing in, sensing the disturbance. The forge had been dormant for eons, but it was awakening now, and humanity's final chance for freedom depended on whether they could master its power before the aliens arrived to crush them. "Keep moving. Cover every exit," Harper ordered. "We won't let them get to her." Jensen and Cole moved to the edges of the chamber, weapons raised, eyes scanning for any sign of the enemy. The tension was unbearable as the sounds of the alien forces grew closer, the vibrations of their ships pressing into the very bones of the mountain. But as the forge hummed to life, Dr. Cortez gasped. "It's opening. It's asking for a sacrifice. I don't know what it means, but we have to do it." The team froze, looking at each other, uncertainty written on their faces. The forge demanded a price, but what could they give? They had nothing left to offer, except their lives. Harper didn't hesitate. "If that's what it takes, we'll pay it, but we're not going down without a fight." The forge pulsed, waiting. The enemy was close now, and the chamber's walls seemed to close in around them. Would they unlock the power of the forge in time? Or would this be their final stand? The forge pulsed with a relentless energy, as if it were alive, waiting to be fed. Dr. Cortez's hands trembled over the terminal as she deciphered the final cryptic sequence. The alien voice in her mind grew louder, more insistent, a low hum reverberating through her skull. It wasn't just a warning, it was a command. The forge was demanding something, and whatever it was, they couldn't refuse it. I don't understand," Cortez muttered, her voice strained. It says the forge requires a blood sacrifice." Jensen whipped her head around. Her expression hardened with disbelief. "What does that mean? You're saying someone has to die?" Dr. Cortez's eyes widened. "No, not necessarily. It might not be literal. But it's the only way to unlock its true power." Harper's face tightened, the weight of the situation settling over him like a heavy cloak. He gripped the edge of the terminal, his voice low but filled with authority. "We don't have time to second-guess. If this is our only way out, we're going to do it." The hum of the forge intensified, a deep, almost primal sound that reverberated through their bones. The entire chamber seemed to be alive with energy, the walls vibrating as if the mountain itself was waking from a long slumber. A cold, metallic shriek echoed through the chamber, and the sound of alien footsteps grew louder. The enemy was closing in fast. The team had little time to make a decision, and the clock was ticking. The air crackled with tension, each heartbeat growing louder than the last. "We'll make the sacrifice," Harper said, his voice steady, but his eyes scanning the chamber. "Whoever it takes, we do it for humanity." Cortez's fingers shook as she typed in the final sequence. The symbols on the terminal flickered, then solidified into a clear message: "Unlock the forge. Awaken the arsenal of freedom." But as she pressed the final key, a violent tremor shook the ground beneath their feet. The forge roared to life with a blinding flash of light. The cavern was bathed in an intense glow, so bright that for a moment they couldn't see anything at all. The air grew thick, charged with an almost tangible energy that pressed against their skin. And then, as the light faded, they saw it. From the depths of the forge, ancient machines, more complex and advanced than anything they had ever seen, began to rise from the stone floor. They were weapons of unimaginable power, crafted for a war long forgotten, designed to obliterate anything that threatened the forge. The arsenal of freedom had been unlocked. Dr. Cortez staggered backward, her breath caught in her throat. This is it. We've done it." Harper's eyes widened as he took in the sight of the weapons emerging from the forge. Each one was unique, sleek, gleaming, and deadly. Some resembled massive cannons, others were intricate energy blades, and still others seemed to defy description altogether. They were weapons designed to turn the tide of war, and they hummed with a promise of destruction. But before they could marvel at the arsenal's power, a loud guttural screech echoed from the far end of the chamber. Alien figures began to appear, their twisted forms emerging from the darkness. Tall, armored beings with faces twisted into cruel masks, their eyes glowing with an eerie light. They were the invaders, and they have found them. "We've got company," Cole muttered, his voice cold. He didn't hesitate. Grabbing one of the energy blades from the forge, he swung it with practiced ease, testing its weight. The weapon hummed with a crackling energy that made the hairs on his neck stand up. Harper stepped forward, drawing a sleek energy rifle from the forge. "Form up. We're not letting them take this place." Jensen and Cole moved to take defensive positions, weapons raised and ready. The alien forces advanced with unnerving precision, their movements calculated and relentless. But now, they were facing weapons unlike anything they had ever encountered. The arsenal of freedom wasn't just a collection of machines. It was humanity's response to oppression, a desperate act of defiance. Dr. Cortez stumbled back to her feet, her eyes wild with both fear and exhilaration. "We can't just stand here. We need to activate the forge's core, fully. That's where the real power lies." "The core is right below us," Harper said, his eyes scanning the approaching alien forces. "But we'll have to fight our way to it." Without another word, the resistance team charged forward, weapons blazing. The alien forces, caught off guard by the sheer intensity of their assault, faltered for a moment, but quickly regained their composure. The chamber erupted into chaos as the team fought back with all the strength they had. The weapons of the forge crackled with devastating energy as the team tore into the alien forces. Each blast sent shockwaves through the chamber, the ground trembling beneath their feet. But for every alien soldier they took down, more seemed to appear, pouring in from the darkened tunnels. Cortez scrambled to the terminal, her fingers moving quickly over the controls. Almost there. Just a few more seconds. The forge roared again, louder now, as the core began to activate. A blinding light filled the room, bathing everything in its brilliant glow. The arsenal of freedom was about to unleash its full potential. But as the core powered up, the ground cracked open beneath them, and the battle was far from over. The entire chamber trembled, the very air thick with anticipation. The core of the forge was activating, its energy rising like a storm about to break. The walls cracked and groaned, as if the mountain itself was protesting the immense power being unleashed beneath it. Dr. Cortez's fingers flew over the terminal, inputting the final commands as the light around them grew ever more intense. "We need to hold them off," Harper shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of energy filling the chamber. He fired a blast from his energy rifle, sending one of the alien soldiers reeling back in a flash of green fire. His eyes were locked on the forge, knowing that the real battle was still to come. The weapons around them were powerful, but they needed the forge's core to truly turn the tide. Jensen, her face painted with dirt and sweat, crouched behind a pillar, firing a steady stream of laser blasts at the advancing alien forces. She'd never fought anything like this before, but the weapons from the forge were doing their job. Each shot was more precise, more deadly than any of the standard human tech they had used in the past. "They're relentless," she muttered, ducking as an alien soldier fired back, narrowly missing her. "I don't know how much longer we can keep them at bay." "We don't have a choice," Harper growled, his eyes narrowing. He dropped to one knee, leveling his rifle at a cluster of aliens and firing again. Each shot seemed to ripple through the air with a force that defied its size. It was almost as if the weapons were alive, feeding off the energy of the forge itself. Cortez's eyes were glued to the terminal, her voice shaking. "Just a few more seconds. If I can just..." She paused, her fingers trembling. "Yes, I've got it. The forge's core is activating. It's pulling energy from the planet's core. This is it." Suddenly, a deep, resounding boom echoed through the chamber as the forge's core activated in full force. The light was blinding, and the hum of the forge reached a deafening crescendo. The chamber was bathed in a fiery glow as tendrils of energy shot out from the forge, illuminating the battlefield in an eerie light. The alien forces were thrown back by the sheer power emanating from the forge. The energy beams lashed out like living serpents, sweeping through the room with surgical precision, obliterating everything in their path. The enemies tried to regroup, but they were caught in a storm of energy they couldn't withstand. "We've got them on the ropes," Cole shouted, grinning as he fired his energy blade, slicing through the alien forces. The Forge's weapons weren't just tools, they were a revolution. The very fabric of the battlefield had shifted in humanity's favor. But the enemies, relentless as ever, regrouped. New reinforcements poured in from hidden tunnels, their weapons crackling with alien energy, matching the intensity of humanity's newfound arsenal. Despite the sudden surge in power, the fight wasn't over. It had just evolved. Harper's eyes flickered to Cortez, who was now frantically typing into the terminal, trying to stabilize the core's output. "Is there any way to push this power to the max?" Harper shouted over the chaos. He fired again, knocking down another wave of invaders, but knowing their numbers were growing by the second. Cortez hesitated for a moment, her mind racing. "Yes, but it's risky. If we push the Forge any harder, we may destabilize it. The core is already at its limit. If we overcharge it," her voice trailed off, leaving the implication unspoken. "We don't have time for hesitation," Harper snapped. He turned to his team, determination in his eyes. "We either end this now, or we die trying. Get ready for the final push." The team nodded, gritting their teeth. Jensen, Cole, and Harper formed a perimeter, the blast shields of their new weapons glowing bright in the darkness. They were more than soldiers now. They were the first to wield humanity's greatest weapon, the Forge's full power. And they would fight with everything they had to protect the future. Dr. Cortez nodded, steeling herself for what came next. "I'm going to do it. Brace yourselves." With a deep breath, she slammed her palm against the terminal. The energy in the room flared to blinding levels. The Forge pulsed one final time, its hum now a deafening roar. The cavern shook violently as the core surged, pushing the power beyond any human limit, like a dam breaking under an impossible flood. Then, with a sound like a thunderclap, the entire chamber exploded in a wave of energy. For a moment, everything went still. The light was blinding, the air thick with the power that had been released. And then, as the echoes of the blast began to die down, the alien forces lay in ruins. The ground around them had been scorched, but the Forge had done its work. Its energy had reshaped the battlefield, and humanity's weapons had proven their worth. But the cost was steep. The Forge's core began to flicker and whine, the power surging uncontrollably. It was a victory, but it came with a price. The team was left standing amid the wreckage, their bodies battered but unbroken, knowing that this was only the beginning. The Forge had unleashed humanity's arsenal of freedom, but now they had to figure out how to survive the aftermath. The chamber was still. The echoing roar of energy had faded, replaced by a heavy, oppressive silence. The remnants of the alien forces littered the ground, their once gleaming armor now charred and broken, evidence of the destructive power of the Forge. But amid the wreckage, there was a lingering tension. The air felt thick with the promise of danger, as if the Forge's unleashed power had come at a great cost. Dr. Cortez stood frozen at the terminal, her eyes wide with disbelief. The core was flickering erratically, unstable from the surge of energy. "We've done it," she whispered, though there was no triumph in her voice, only uncertainty. "The Forge's arsenal has decimated the enemy. But at what price?" Harper approached, his boots crunching on the scorched ground as he surveyed the devastation. His weapon still crackled with residual energy, and his face was grim. "We've won the battle, but the war is far from over. That power surge, there's no telling how long it'll last, or if we can control it." Jensen, her breathing ragged, wiped the sweat from her brow, glancing over at the flickering core. "The Forge is unstable. If we don't do something soon, it could collapse, and everything we just did will be for nothing." Cole, ever the pragmatist, gave a low whistle as he walked among the fallen alien soldiers. "We can't afford to wait around. More of them are going to come, and they'll be ready. We need to secure this place before it all goes south." Harper nodded, his face set with determination. First, we stabilize the forge. Then we move out. We can't let them regroup. He turned to Cortez, who was still staring at the terminal, clearly trying to piece together what had just happened. We need to shut it down before it detonates, she said, her voice strained. If I can reroute the core's energy output, we might be able to salvage it, but it's going to take time. We'll have to stay here and protect the forge until I can do it. Time we don't have, Cole muttered, scanning the shadows for any sign of incoming enemies. Harper clenched his jaw. We don't have a choice. If we leave the forge unchecked, it'll destroy everything. We either risk it or we let the invaders take it from us. And if that happens, we'll lose everything. Dr. Cortez's fingers moved rapidly over the terminal as she began rerouting the core's energy, her brow furrowed in concentration. I just need a few more minutes. Hold them off. The team huddled around the forge, weapons ready, every sense heightened. The tense silence was shattered by the faint sound of movement from the tunnels. The alien forces weren't done yet. They had been decimated, but the forge's eruption had only slowed them down, not stopped them. They're coming, Jensen said, tightening her grip on her weapon. They know what we have now. We're not going to be left alone for long. Harper set his jaw. We don't need to be alone. We fight together. This is humanity's fight. We don't back down. Just as he finished speaking, a low growl filled the air, echoing off the cavern walls. From the shadows emerged the leaders of the alien forces, tall, armored figures with glowing eyes that pierced the dark. These weren't just soldiers. These were the generals, the strategists, the ones who had led the invasion, and they were coming to reclaim the forge. Jensen fired first, her shots precise, knocking down one of the generals, but there were too many. More alien soldiers followed in their wake, overwhelming them with sheer numbers. The team fought valiantly, but the enemy was adapting to their new weapons. This isn't enough, Cole yelled, his voice filled with urgency. We need more firepower. We've got no choice but to make do, Harper shouted back, stepping forward with renewed resolve. Cortez, how much longer? I'm almost there. Dr. Cortez's voice was strained, but determined. Her hands moved faster, her mind working furiously to stabilize the forge. I just need another. A loud explosion rocked the chamber, cutting off her words. The ground shook violently as a massive chunk of the cavern's ceiling collapsed, sending debris flying in all directions. The alien forces roared in approval as they advanced, their weapons crackling with power. Harper's heart pounded in his chest. Cortez, you have to do it now. The last of the energy from the forge surged through the room in a brilliant flash of light, causing the alien soldiers to stagger back. The forge's core powered down, but in doing so, it released one final blast, sending a shockwave through the entire cavern. The alien forces were thrown backward, their armor cracking and sizzling as the intense energy slammed into them. We've done it, Cortez gasped, her eyes wide. She staggered back from the terminal, exhausted but relieved. The forge is stable. For now. Harper's shoulders sagged with a mixture of relief and exhaustion, but he knew this was only the beginning. The alien forces had been pushed back, temporarily. They still had to figure out what came next. They had the forge's power, but the war was far from over. We've bought ourselves some time, he said, his voice filled with quiet determination. But we need to move fast. This fight is far from finished. The dust from the explosion was still settling, swirling in the dim light as Harper's team regrouped around the forge. Their weapons hummed with energy, their faces etched with exhaustion, but there was no time to rest. The alien forces, though momentarily stunned, were recovering quickly. They had faced humanity before, and they would not underestimate the power of the forge again. Harper looked over at Dr. Cortez, who was still catching her breath after the effort of stabilizing the forge. How long do we have? Her eyes were distant, her mind still processing the aftereffects of the forge's power surge. Minutes, maybe less. If we're going to keep the aliens from taking control of the forge, we need to move. I've rerouted its systems, but its defenses are still weak. The surge drained its power, and it won't be long before they find a way to breach. Then we need to give them a reason not to, Harper said, his voice firm as he motioned for the team to spread out. Jensen, Cole, get to those defensive positions. We're holding them off as long as we can. Jensen nodded, adjusting her gear as she moved to the front line. Understood. We've got one chance to make this count. Cole was already at the far end, scanning the tunnels with his rifle raised. They're coming. I can feel it. Harper glanced back at the forge, the massive, now stabilized structure that had the potential to turn the tide of the war. It was a beacon of hope, but it was also a massive target. The aliens had already seen its power, and now they knew what humanity was capable of. They wouldn't stop until they destroyed it or seized control. Stay sharp, Harper ordered. He turned to Dr. Cortez. Can you get the forge to make more weapons? Anything we can use. Cortez's gaze flickered to the terminal, then back to the battlefield. It's possible, but I need more time. The forge is mostly depleted right now. It'll take hours to produce anything substantial. If we're going to defend it, we'll need to do it with what we have. Harper clenched his jaw, scanning the horizon. Then we fight with what we've got. We hold this ground until we can't anymore. The first wave of alien soldiers appeared, their forms emerging from the smoke and debris. Their armored bodies shimmered in the low light, and their weapons crackled with energy. They were relentless, undeterred by the devastation they'd already suffered. This was their last chance to reclaim the forge, and they would throw everything they had into it. Here they come, Jensen shouted, her voice filled with tension. She fired a series of rapid shots, each one landing with pinpoint accuracy, knocking down the front line of the advancing alien forces. The alien soldiers hissed in anger, their weapons raising to retaliate. But the team wasn't alone. From the darkness behind them, more human soldiers appeared, partisans who had infiltrated the tunnels during the chaos, their faces determined. They wore makeshift armor and carried scavenged weapons, but they were armed with the same resolve that had driven humanity to survive. Reinforcements, Cole grinned, his voice thick with relief. We've got backup. Harper's heart surged with hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough. They would fight together, as one, against the overwhelming odds. For Earth, for the Forge, for freedom. The ground shook again as another wave of alien reinforcements poured into view. This time, the attackers were more coordinated, their strategies designed to overwhelm and outflank the humans. They split into smaller squads, maneuvering through the smoke and rubble, trying to surround them. But Harper and his team were ready. Move out, Harper shouted. We need to keep them off the forge. Don't let them get close. The battle intensified. Energy blasts filled the air, lighting up the darkened cavern in a kaleidoscope of deadly fire. Harper fired his weapon with unerring precision, each shot sending another enemy crumbling to the ground. Jensen's rifle crackled with power, each bolt of energy striking like a hammer blow, cutting through the alien ranks. Cole's energy blade hummed as he swung it with deadly accuracy, his movements fluid as he sliced through the invaders. But the aliens weren't retreating. They were adapting, learning. Their strategies were becoming more sophisticated, and the pressure on the team was mounting. The human resistance was strong, but the alien forces were relentless, and the Forge's power couldn't sustain them forever. Harper, Dr. Cortez's voice cut through the chaos. She was still at the terminal, frantically working. The Forge is reaching critical mass. I've unlocked a failsafe. If we trigger it now, it could take out the entire cavern, but it'll also destroy the Forge. Harper's eyes widened as he processed her words. The decision was impossible. They couldn't just abandon everything they had fought for, but the alternative was to be overrun and lose everything. The Forge was humanity's last hope, but it could also be their undoing. Is there any other choice? Harper called back to her, his voice taut with tension. Cortez hesitated. No, But if we do it, we have to be sure. We'll be locked in here." Harper gripped his weapon tightly, his heart pounding. There was no time to think. "Do it," he ordered, his voice filled with quiet resolve. "We fight to the end." The cavern echoed with the sounds of the ongoing battle, the sharp crackle of energy weapons, and the guttural roars of the alien forces mixing in a deadly symphony. Harper's mind raced, the weight of his decision pressing heavily on his chest. The Forge was humanity's greatest weapon, but it was also their greatest risk. If Cortez activated the failsafe, it would obliterate everything. The Forge, the alien invaders, and all the soldiers in its path. It was the final gamble, the ultimate act of defiance. He looked over at Dr. Cortez, who was still at the terminal, her fingers flying over the controls with frantic urgency. Sweat dripped down her face as the countdown clock on the display ticked down. She was giving humanity a chance to survive, but it would come at an incredible cost. "Harper, we have to hold them off a little longer," she shouted over the din of battle. "The failsafe is almost ready, but we need time." Harper turned to the rest of his team, their faces grim but resolute. "We've got one shot at this, people. We need to buy Dr. Cortez the time she needs. No matter what, we hold this ground." Jensen was already at the front, her rifle blazing as she picked off alien soldiers one by one. Her movements were fluid, precise. Every shot a reminder of her skill, her determination. Cole was close by, his energy blade cutting through the air with brutal efficiency. The alien forces were regrouping, forming a wall of armored soldiers, but they were slowing down. The sheer intensity of the resistance was beginning to make them hesitate. "Come on, you bastards," Cole muttered, slashing through another alien soldier with a vicious swing of his blade. "Is this all you've got?" The alien generals, however, were not so easily deterred. They advanced with renewed ferocity, their advanced weapons lighting up the cavern as they fired at will. They knew what was at stake. They could sense the power of the Forge, and they would stop at nothing to reclaim it. The tension in the air was palpable. Harper's voice cut through the chaos. "Move out. Don't let them get to Cortez." The human forces, led by the core team, pushed forward, intercepting the alien commanders in a desperate attempt to buy time. Harper fought like a man possessed, his weapon in constant motion, taking down aliens left and right. Jensen and Cole were right beside him, cutting through the enemy ranks with ruthless efficiency. But for every alien they felled, two more appeared in their place, pushing them back, inch by inch. Cortez's voice rang out from the terminal, her words a beacon of hope amidst the storm. "I'm ready to trigger the failsafe. Get to cover." Without hesitation, Harper turned and sprinted toward Cortez, his pulse racing. The alien forces were closing in, but they had no choice now. The failsafe had to be activated, or they would lose everything. "Do it now," Harper shouted. Cortez didn't hesitate. Her finger hovered over the final button, the key to humanity's last stand. Her hands trembled, but her resolve remained unshaken. "Goodbye, humanity's future," she whispered, and she pressed the button. In an instant, the entire cavern seemed to vibrate with raw energy. The Forge, its power concentrated beyond measure, began to hum with an almost sentient awareness. A blinding light filled the space, radiating outward in every direction. The alien forces, caught in the blast radius, screamed in terror as their bodies were torn apart by the explosive energy. The shockwave ripped through the cavern, leveling everything in its path. The walls shook violently, cracks spreading like spider webs across the rock as the ground itself trembled. Harper felt the heat of the blast at his back, a force of nature that would leave nothing untouched. But then, in a sudden and painful quiet, the explosion receded. The light faded, and the deafening roar of the Forge's final act was replaced by a stunned silence. Harper stumbled to his feet, disoriented by the blast. The cavern was now unrecognizable. The alien forces had been obliterated, their bodies vaporized by the sheer magnitude of the Forge's power. But so too had everything else. The forge, the infrastructure, the tunnels, all of it had been reduced to rubble. Harper turned to find his team, his breath ragged in his chest. Jensen was still standing, though her armor was scorched, her face streaked with ash. Cole was nearby, his expression dazed but alive. And Cortez, she was kneeling on the ground, her face pale but focused. We did it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's over." Harper felt a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. They had won the battle, yes, but at what cost? The forge, the last weapon of humanity's hope, was now gone. They had given everything to stop the alien invasion, to protect their world, their people. "We survived," Harper replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Humanity always survives." Jensen, her rifle now slung over her shoulder, gave him a grim smile. "We've fought the impossible, and we've won. Earth still stands." "We didn't just win," Cortez added, her voice growing stronger. "We sent a message. No one, no force, can ever take Earth from us. We are our own masters." As the dust settled and the echoes of the battle faded, Harper stood tall, gazing at the horizon beyond the ruined cavern. They had rebuilt the forge, and now they had rebuilt Earth's future. The fight wasn't over, but for now, humanity had a moment of peace, and that in itself was a victory.